I never thought the gentle clinking of porcelain together could be the most terrifying sound in the world. If you are reading these lines and suddenly see an old tea set appear in your house without known origin, please smash it immediately. Don't be curious, don't try to find out its value, and absolutely do not let the teapot lid open. I wish I had done that on October 14th past. My name is Elias, 26 years old. I am a freelance graphic designer, meaning I am always broke and desperate to find a cheap place to live. So when the lawyer announced that my estranged Aunt Meredith, whom I hadn't met in 15 years, had left me her Victorian house in the Snohomish suburbs, about 40 minutes drive from Seattle, I signed the papers without thinking. That was a mistake. The house was a massive, gloomy architectural block built in 1924 with peeling gray paint that looked like dead skin. It was raining heavily when I unloaded the last box. The cold in this Pacific Northwest is not just skin deep. It is the damp kind that creeps into the marrow, making your lungs feel heavy every time you breathe. Inside, the house reeked of dried lavender and old dust. The furniture was intact, as if Aunt Meredith had just gone out to the market and not died of a sudden heart failure 3 weeks ago. The first thing that caught my attention was the dining room. It was located at the end of a long, narrow hallway where daylight seemed unable to reach. In the middle of the room was a long oak table, enough for 10 people, and in the corner was a floor-to-ceiling curio cabinet. Everything in the house was covered in a thin layer of dust, except for that cabinet. Its glass was crystal clear, without a single fingerprint. Inside was a set of bone china teacups, white with gold rims, with intricate crimson rose patterns that looked like they were bleeding. There were 6 cups in total, 6 saucers, and a large teapot in the middle. I found a tiny brass key taped under the dining table. When I put the key in the cabinet lock, a dry click sounded, unreasonably loud in the quiet space. The door opened, blasting me with icy cold air and a strong metallic smell, like old coins soaked in water. "Must be expensive antiques," I muttered, trying to shake off the chill running down my spine. I put on gloves, carefully took the tea set out to the dining table to check for any cracks. When my fingers touched the first cup, I pulled my hand back in shock. It was cold. Not the cold of an inanimate object, but the bone-chilling cold like touching the hand of someone who just came in from the snow. But in this room, the heater was on at 22 degrees Celsius. I arranged the 6 cups in a circle around the teapot, exactly as they were displayed in the cabinet. It was 5:45 p.m. Outside, the sky had started to darken. The shadows of old oak branches brushing against the dining room window made screeching sounds, like fingernails scratching on a blackboard. I decided to leave them there and go upstairs to clean the bedroom. I told myself I was just tired after the trip and my imagination was overreacting. But as I walked up the stairs, I had an intense feeling, the primal feeling of prey being stalked. That downstairs in the dining room, those white porcelain mouths were waiting. And I swear, just before I closed the bedroom door, I heard a very faint sound from downstairs. Clink. The sound of the teapot lid being closed. The characteristic gray, gloomy light of the Washington sky woke me up at 7:15 a.m. Last night, I slept fitfully, full of disjointed dreams about footsteps walking on wooden floors, but when I woke up, the absolute silence of the house made me feel a bit relieved. I dragged my feet to the kitchen, my mind still groggy from lack of caffeine. I needed a cup of strong black coffee before starting to clean up the mess in the living room. To get to the kitchen, I had to pass through the dining room. I froze at the door frame. The coffee cup in my hand almost fell to the ground. On the long oak table, the tea set was still there, arranged in a circle like last night. But there was one difference. The cup at the 1 o'clock position, the first one to the right of the spout, was steaming. I stood, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my chest. I was certain that last night all 6 cups were empty. I am the only one in the house. The front door was double locked. The windows were all shut tight. I walked closer, step by slow step, as if afraid of startling a wild beast. It was filled about 3/4 full. The liquid inside was dark brown, almost black, much thicker than normal tea. I reached out and touched the cup lightly. It was hot, burning hot, as if boiling water had just been poured in mere seconds before I came down. Then that smell hit my nose. At first, it had the elegant aroma of fine Earl Grey tea, the intense scent of bergamot, but right underneath that layer of fragrance was a disgusting taste that made my stomach churn. The sickly, sweet, cloying smell of decaying flesh. like the smell of a dead rat trapped in the wall in the middle of summer. Must be a leak, I reassured myself, my trembling voice echoing in the empty room. Bone dry. The yellowed plaster was intact, not a single crack or drop of water. My hands started shaking violently. I picked up the cup, the heat transmitting through the fragile porcelain burning my fingertips, and ran quickly to the kitchen sink. I dumped it out. That liquid didn't flow like water or tea. It gushed out in chunks, thick and slimy, like old machine oil, or like clotted blood. It clung tightly to the white porcelain sink, leaving long, greasy, reddish-brown streaks. I turned the faucet on full blast, scrubbing frantically. The stench rose more pungently when meeting hot water, making me cover my nose and dry heave. It took 5 minutes of scrubbing with strong soap for those stains to wash away completely. But even when the sink was sparkling clean, I still felt my skin was sticky and filthy. I went back to the dining room to get a cloth to wipe the cup. When I looked into the pristine white porcelain cup, I saw a small residue remaining at the bottom. It wasn't tea residue. It looked like a broken piece of a human fingernail. I threw the cup back onto the table, the sound of porcelain hitting wood piercing the ear. "You're sleepwalking, Elias," I muttered, trying to cling to the only explanation that sounded scientific. "You're too stressed. You're sleepwalking and doing these crazy things." But deep in my gut, I knew I had never sleepwalked in my life. And I knew one thing for sure. In my house, there is no tea that smells like a corpse. That night, I decided not to let this madness continue. If I really was sleepwalking, I would lock myself in, or lock it in. I drove to town to buy a heavy-duty chain lock and a roll of clear tape. Before going to sleep, I locked the dining room door tightly from the outside. To be more certain, I taped a small piece of tape at the edge of the door, connecting it to the frame. If someone or myself opened the door during the night, the tape would tear. It couldn't be faked. I swallowed 2 sleeping pills to ensure I would stay in bed, then pulled the blanket over my head. That night passed in heavy silence, but I still felt like someone was standing at the foot of the stairs, listening to my breathing. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache from the side effects of the pills. I stumbled down the stairs, heart pounding in my chest. The dining room door was still shut tight. I knelt down to check. The tape was still intact, sticking firmly to the old wood paint. The cold chain lock lay silent. I sighed in relief, a forced smile appearing on my lips. "See," I told myself, "you're just being paranoid." I undid the chain, turned the doorknob, and walked in. The smile vanished. The blood in my body seemed to freeze. The air in the room was thick, at least 10 degrees colder than the hallway outside. And that smell, the smell of rotting flesh mixed with bergamot, was now so strong it made my eyes water. On the table, the first cup, the one I had washed yesterday, was full again. And right next to it, the second cup, clockwise, was also filled to the brim. 2 pitch black cups stood out on the dusty white tablecloth, like 2 hollow eyes staring at me. The liquid inside was flat as a mirror, not evaporating, not rippling. I backed away, my back hitting the door frame hard. Impossible. I have the only key. The tape didn't tear. Windows shut tight. No one could get in here. I tried to muster all my courage to step closer. I realized a pattern that made my stomach churn with fear. The spout of the porcelain teapot. Last night, it was pointing towards the entrance. But now, it was pointing straight at the empty space between the second and third cup. It is moving. It is rotating. Night by night. Cup by cup. Clockwise. I counted quickly in my head. There are 6 cups. Today's the second night. 4 nights left. What will happen when the 6th cup is filled? I didn't dare touch them anymore. I backed out, locked the door, hands shaking so much I dropped the keys twice. I need proof. I need to see what is happening in that room while I sleep. I rummaged through the unpacked cardboard boxes, found the tiny surveillance camera that I used to watch my cat in the old apartment. It has a night vision infrared mode. I spent the whole afternoon installing it in the corner of the dining room ceiling, hidden behind thick curtains, lens pointing straight down at the tea set. I connected it to the laptop in the bedroom. "Let's see what the hell you are," I whispered, looking at the laptop screen displaying the static black and white image of the room. The teapot lay there, silent, harmless. But I knew, as soon as darkness fell, the tea party would continue. I fell asleep right on the desk, face down on the laptop keyboard. When I started awake, The clock on the screen read 6:30 a.m. The pale blue light from the screen was the only thing illuminating my gloomy bedroom. The first thing I did was look at the surveillance camera display window. My stomach knotted, a feeling of nausea rising up to my throat. On the screen, in that sealed-tight dining room, the third cup was full. 3 pitch-black streaks on white porcelain. Half the tea set had been served. Shaking hands, I reached for the mouse and dragged the time slider back to last night. I fast-forwarded through hours of tedious silence. The pitch-black room, only infrared light turning everything into ghostly gray-green patches. 2:58 a.m. Nothing. 2:59 a.m. Still silent. And then, exactly at the moment the clock struck 3 hours, my laptop screen flared up violently. The video didn't cut out completely, but it was torn apart by horizontal static lines. The image of the room was distorted, stretched, and twisted as if viewed through a convex mirror. But the sound was still there, and it was terrifyingly clear. Through the computer speakers, overriding the crackle of electromagnetic static, I heard a sharp sound. Clink. The sound of the teapot lid being lifted. Then the sound of porcelain sliding on wood. Scrape. Scrape. I held my breath, pressing my ear close to the speaker. Next was the sound of pouring. But it didn't sound like tea trickling. It sounded heavy. A wet, slimy sound. Bloop. Bloop. Shh. Like someone pouring liquid mud or something viscous from a height. In the chaotic static on the screen, I strained my eyes trying to find a shape. There was a moment, lasting less than 1/10 of a second. I had to rewind 10 times to be sure. I saw a shadow. It wasn't standing by the table. It was hovering above. A long, gaunt, dark patch drooping down from the ceiling, right above the teapot. It looked like an oversized long arm, or a swaying rope. Then, as suddenly as it began, at 3 hours, 1 minute, the image returned to sharp, normal. No one in the room. The black shadow on the ceiling vanished. But on the table, the third cup was steaming furiously. I collapsed into the chair, cold sweat soaking the back of my shirt. The security camera wasn't broken. It recorded something, but the presence of that entity was too strong, too aberrant from reality that electronic devices couldn't handle its image. I didn't dare go down to the dining room. I didn't dare face that rotting smell again, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. 3 cups, 3 nights. If this pattern holds, I only have 3 nights left before the circle closes. And the question kept hovering in my head, echoing like a death knell. Who will drink them? I need to find out what the hell Aunt Meredith got mixed up in. I remembered the pile of old papers the lawyer had given, along with the house keys. Perhaps the answer lies in there. I rummaged through the cardboard box sent by the law firm. Mostly old utility bills, tax receipts, and Christmas postcards never sent. Aunt Meredith lived a life so lonely, it was heartbreaking. But at the bottom of the box, wrapped carefully in a dark red velvet scarf, I found a black leather notebook. It had no name, no title, just the smell of mold, and the pungent scent of old ink hitting me when I opened the first page. The first pages were written in neat, elegant cursive. She noted down gardening, weather, and recipes. But when I flipped to the pages written last month, right before she died, the handwriting started to change. They became shaky, scrawled. The lines overlapped, ink pressed deep into the paper, as if the writer was using a knife instead of a fountain pen. September 12. It opened by itself again. I locked the cabinet tight. That stench, it's soaking into the curtains. September 15. Tonight is the third cup. I hear them whispering down in the dining room. Not human voices. It sounds like a pig squealing when being slaughtered, but quiet and rhythmic. I flipped quickly to the last page, heart pounding in my chest. This page was tattered, stained with reddish-brown spots. I dared not think if it was coffee or dried blood. There, Aunt Meredith had written down the rules, handwriting huge and panicked, underlined so many times it tore the paper. Rules of the tea party. Never drink unless invited. Do not break the tea set. They will mend themselves, but he will be angry. 1 cup a night, clockwise. When the 6th cup is full, he will sit down. The last line was written in capital letters, so shaky it was hard to read. He does not come to drink tea. He comes to eat. I dropped the notebook to the floor. The room suddenly became suffocatingly silent. Dust particles suspended in the late afternoon sunbeam seemed to stop moving too. I looked at the wall clock. 5:45 p.m. The sun was setting behind the old oak trees, pulling long, pitch-black shadows creeping into the living room. Tonight is the 4th night. 4 cups will be filled. He comes to eat. Eat what? Or eat who? I suddenly realized a horrifying detail in the diary that I had missed earlier due to fear. Aunt Meredith died of heart failure on September 21st. If counting back, that day coincides perfectly with the 6th night since she started writing about the cups. I can't stay here. I don't care about the house, the will, or anything else anymore. I have to go right now. I grabbed my wallet and car keys, rushing to the front door. But when my hand touched the cold brass doorknob, I heard it. From the dining room, a sound rang out clearly in the twilight silence. Clink. The sound of the teapot lid dropping. But it's only 6 p.m. Why is it starting so early? The sound of the teapot lid hitting the wooden floor was not just a sound, it was a sentence. It was 6:02 p.m. The 3 a.m. rule had been broken. He is losing patience. I didn't run for the door anymore. A frantic rage, the kind born of extreme fear, flared up inside me. I rushed into the kitchen, grabbed a roll of heavy-duty industrial black trash bags, and stormed into the dining room. The room was flooded with twilight darkness. The smell of rotting flesh was so strong I had to breathe through my mouth to avoid vomiting. On the table, just as I predicted, 4 cups were full. That pitch-black liquid was bubbling slightly, as if boiling furiously, even without fire. "Enough!" I screamed, voice cracking with panic. I opened the trash bag wide, placed it at the edge of the table, and used my arm to sweep everything off. Crash! The sound of porcelain shattering was strangely satisfying to hear. I clearly heard the sharp shards clashing against each other inside the bag. Not satisfied yet, I grabbed the bag's mouth and smashed it hard on the floor 3 more times. Bam, bam, bam. I felt the crushed porcelain shards piercing the plastic, scratching my hand through the gloves. Surely nothing could remain intact after that destruction. I dragged the heavy bag to the back door, threw it straight into the metal trash can on the side of the house, and slammed the lid shut. "It's over," I panted, leaning back against the door, sweat streaming down my forehead even though it was raining cold. I turned back into the house, intending to pack up and leave immediately. But when I stepped across the kitchen threshold back into the hallway, I stopped short. The atmosphere in the house had changed. It became physically heavy. Every step I took felt like wading through chest-deep water. My lungs had to struggle to pull in air, and my ears started ringing like when a plane lands too fast. I looked towards the dining room. The ceiling light wasn't on, but I could clearly see the oak table. Sitting neatly in the exact center of the table, spotless without a scratch, was the tea set. Not a single piece missing. The crimson roses on the pot seemed more vibrant, fresher, as if just watered with blood. And most terrifying were the 4 cups. They were still full. That thick black liquid hadn't spilled a single drop during my rampage. It still lay there, flat, reflecting my bloodless, pale face. I collapsed to the floor, my legs having no strength left. I realized I wasn't facing a haunted pottery set. I was facing a bent reality. They cannot be destroyed, and I had a terrible feeling that I couldn't leave either. That was when I saw the teapot spout slowly budge again. It was pointing towards the 5th cup, the 5th night. I am not running away anymore. When I tried to start the car in the evening, the engine died completely, even though the battery was replaced last week. The phone had no signal, even when I climbed onto the roof. I understood the problem. This house is not just an architecture of wood and stone, it is a stomach, and the stomach lid has closed. I decided to face it. If I have to die, I will not die while cowering under a blanket in bed. I dragged a stool into the corner of the dining room, the most hidden from light. In my hand was an aluminum baseball bat I found in the garage. It was cold in my hand, but its weight brought a false sense of comfort. The clock on the wall ticked down. 2:45 a.m. The temperature in the room began to drop. Not the gradual drop of night, but a free fall of temperature. I could see my breath exhaling into thick, milky white clouds like fog. The varnish on the dining table began to crack from the cold, making small cracking sounds. The glass windows fogged up with frost, but frost clinging to the inside. I gripped the bat tight, knuckles white. "Come out," I hissed through my teeth, even though my teeth were chattering uncontrollably. Exactly 3 a.m. The space plunged into absolute silence. The wind howling outside vanished. The crickets fell silent. Even my heartbeat seemed swallowed by this thick, sticky silence. And then, the teapot began to move. This time, it didn't slide on the table. It slowly floated up. It hovered about 20 centimeters above the table, bobbing gently like a boat on still water. I held my breath, eyes wide open, trying to see through the dim darkness. From the pitch-black void above the pot, something began to materialize. First were the fingertips. Long, gaunt, to the point of just skin and bone. The skin was pale, gray, like the color of stale fish meat. Its fingernails were jet black, curved and sharp, looking more like rusted blades than nails. That hand. It wasn't attached to any body that I could see. It floated in midair, gently grasping the teapot handle. My throat choked up. A scream stuck there. I wanted to rush forward, smash that damn hand with the aluminum bat, but my body betrayed me. My limbs were completely paralyzed, heavy, as if filled with lead. It was sleep paralysis, but I was completely awake. The hand tilted the pot. Bloop, bloop. That thick, pitch-black liquid flowed from the spout, falling into the 5th cup. The stench flared up violently, more pungent than all previous nights combined. The smell of scrap metal, tainted blood, and ancient decay. When the last drop fell, the hand didn't vanish immediately. It paused. Then slowly, very slowly, those long fingers rotated the teapot, pointing the spout towards me. Though I saw no face, I felt a gaze. A frantic hunger was focusing on me from the darkness above that hand. A voice spoke. Not from the air, but resonating directly inside my skull, wet and slippery like worms crawling in the brain. Only one spot left. The hand dissolved into nothingness. The teapot dropped with a thud onto the table. 5 cups were full. 1 last cup remained. The cup opposite the host's chair. I woke up when weak daylight cast upon the cold wooden floor. My body was stiff, joints aching, as if someone had crushed them with a hammer while I slept. I had lain there unconscious for 6 hours. The clock read 9 a.m., but the sky outside the window was a murky gray, like sewage water. No sun, no birds. I crawled up, pain shooting through my spine. The first thought in my head was, break the door. I grabbed the heavy wooden stool, wound up and swung with all my might at the large glass window overlooking the garden. I braced myself for the crashing sound of glass and the rush of free air. Thud. The stool bounced back, hitting my chest hard, knocking me backward. The glass. It didn't break. It didn't even crack. It was elastic like a block of transparent rubber, absorbing the entire impact and pushing it back. I frantically ran to the front door. I twisted the knob, shook it hard, then rammed it with my shoulder. Useless. The oak door seemed to have fused into the door frame. No gaps left. Wood had grown into wood, turning the only exit into a solid wall. I am trapped. The house has digested me. I trudged back to the dining room, the only place that seemed alive in this dead house. On the table, 5 cups containing pitch-black liquid were still steaming lightly. The stench had saturated the air to the point I couldn't smell it anymore. Or my sense of smell had died. Only the 6th cup was empty. It lay there, isolated, stark, white, innocent to the point of cruelty. I sat down in the chair opposite the teapot, the position reserved for the 6th cup. I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had passed the threshold of endurance and transformed into a numb acceptance. I took out Aunt Meredith's tattered diary to read one last time, trying to find some meaning in the insane lines. He is hungry. He is always hungry. Tea is just a ritual. Blood is the main meal. And in a small corner, written in faint pencil, the host must raise the glass before guests dine. That is the rule of politeness. Host? Who is the host? Me? The heir to this house? Or him? The entity occupying it? Time passed absurdly fast. I felt like I had only sat down for a few minutes, but darkness had begun to creep from the corners of the room. Long shadows crawled on the floor like black snakes, gathering towards the legs of the dining table. 6 p.m. sunset fell like a morning veil. I put the diary down. I knew I couldn't hide anywhere anymore. If he wants a tea party, I will give him a tea party. I adjusted my collar, sat up straight in the chair, hands placed on the table, eyes staring at the crimson rose porcelain pot. Come here. I whispered into the darkness. And the darkness answered. Time in this house no longer flows, according to the laws of physics. I sat there, staring into the darkness, and the clock hands on the wall spun wildly. 6 in the evening turned into midnight in just a few blinks. The later it got, the more the dining room transformed. The elegant wallpapered walls began to ooze water, a pitch-black, viscous liquid flowing down to the wooden floor. The ceiling seemed to lower, bulging with swollen lumps like the surface of a diseased liver. Then the noises started. Screech. The chair at the first cup's position, to my right, slid back by itself. A solid black shadow condensed, slowly forming a figure. It wasn't a transparent ghost. It was solid, heavy, and wet. A woman. Or something that used to be a woman. She wore a tattered nightgown from the 22nds. But her head was swollen, abnormally large. The facial skin stretched tight as if about to burst, purple from drowning. She sat down, bulging white eyes, staring blankly at the pitch-black teacup in front of her. Screech. Screech. The next 2 chairs were pulled out, one after another. A man with his throat torn open, exposing the white windpipe. A child. Oh God. A skeletal child. Mouth sewn shut with coarse black thread. One by one. 5 chairs around the table were occupied. 5 guests sat there in absolute silence. No one breathed. No one moved. They just sat, rotting hands placed neatly on the table, waiting. The stench in the room was now so terrible my eyes watered profusely, vision blurring. Only 2 spots remained empty. One was the chair at the opposite end, reserved for him. 2 is the chair I'm sitting in. And in front of me is the 6th cup, the only one still empty. I understood. These 5 people, they were the previous heirs. They are the ones who drank their cups dry. And now they are imprisoned here, becoming permanent guests in this hellish party. The wall clock struck a loud clack. 2:59 a.m. 5 pairs of white eyes turned in unison, boring, straight into me. Their gaze held no pity. It held hunger, expectation. They are waiting for a new member to join the club. In the middle of the table, the teapot lid began to vibrate violently. Clink, clink, clink. The sound got faster, more piercing, like the cracking of broken bones. And then, at exactly 3 a.m., the chandelier above exploded. Pop! Total darkness swallowed the room. But I didn't need light to see what was happening. Because the teapot. It was emitting a sickly red ghostly light from inside the porcelain. It slowly floated up. And this time, it flew straight towards me. The red light from inside the teapot was the only light source in the room, casting ghostly, madly dancing shadows on the faces of the 5 corpses around me. I could clearly see every rotting fiber of flesh on the face of the woman to the right, and the crude stitches on the child's mouth. The teapot stopped right above my 6th cup. It tilted down. Gurgle. Gurgle. Not the sound of flowing water. It was the sound of something thick, heavy, reluctantly leaving its shelter. A stream of pitch-black liquid, thick like molten tar, surged from the spout. It fell into the bottom of the pristine white cup, sizzling like grilled meat on an iron grate. The heat rose up and slapped me in the face, carrying a disgusting taste, indescribable in words. It was the smell of freshly dug graves, mixed with the burning scent of hair and flesh. I wanted to knock the cup away. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. An invisible force was pinning me to the chair, as if the gravity in this room had increased 100-fold. I could only watch helplessly as that pitch-black liquid level rose. Half a cup. 3/4. Full to the brim. The moment the last drop filled the 6th cup, a sound rang out simultaneously from the 5 guests. They started moaning. No, they were laughing. Gurgling, wet laughter coming from damaged throats. The child with the sewn mouth made painful sounds trying to separate the sealed lips. The teapot slowly flew back to the center of the table and lowered. Clack. The circle was closed. And then, from the thick darkness at the opposite end of the table, the place of honor for the host, a chair scraping sound rang out. Screech. Crack. The sound of wooden legs plowing into the floor pierced the brain. The air in the room suddenly became freezing cold. My breath turned to ice the moment it left my mouth. A massive dark mass, larger than any human, slowly emerged from the void. He was so tall, his head touched the ceiling, forced to bend his long neck down to look at the table. He had no face. Where a face should be, there was only a deep black pit, spiraling inward infinitely. But I knew he was looking at me. He was smiling. He raised a gaunt, pale hand with oversized long fingers. The hand I had seen on the camera. Forward. He pointed at the steaming black cup in front of me. His voice rang out, not in the air, but vibrating directly against my eardrums, deep and authoritative like a landslide underground. Drink, air. The 5 guests snapped their heads towards me in unison, their necks cracking like dry branches breaking. They looked at me with hungry eyes. They were waiting for me to drink, because only when I drink does the party truly begin. And I knew what the main course of this party was. It was me. My trembling hand reached out, fingers curled in fear, moving towards the porcelain cup steaming with black smoke. The 5 corpses around seemed to hold their breath, throats emitting faint, excited, hissing sounds. He, the giant black shadow at the head of the table, stooped lower, the black pit, on his face widening as if preparing to swallow my soul the moment the first drop of tea touched my lips. But the moment my hand touched the cold cup handle, a current of electricity zapped through my brain. The host must raise the glass before guests dine. The faint pencil writing in Aunt Meredith's diary flashed like lightning in my chaotic mind. Host. He thinks he is the host because he controls this place. But he is wrong. On paper, before the law, and according to the damn will that brought me here, I am the host. This is my house. This is my tea set. If this is a tea party, then I have the right to decide who drinks first. I gritted my teeth hard enough to taste the tang of blood. Adrenaline exploded in my blood, breaking the paralysis, imprisoning my muscles. Instead of taking the cup, I lunged up, throwing my whole body forward across the large oak table. "I am the host!" I screamed, the sound tearing my throat. The 5 corpses jerked back. The giant black shadow paused in surprise. My hand grabbed the handle of the porcelain teapot. Sizzle! My hand skin seared instantly. The pot was hot as a red-hot coal just pulled from the furnace. The smell of burning flesh rose acridly, mixing with the stench in the room. But I didn't let go. The pain only made me more awake, more frenzied. I yanked the teapot towards me, threw my head back, and brutally shoved the hard porcelain spout straight into my mouth. I didn't pour into a cup. I drank directly from the source. I tipped the pot up. The pitch-black liquid, thick like boiling tar, gushed straight down my throat. No words could describe that pain. It wasn't just hot, it was alive. It slithered down my esophagus like a fire python, burning every mucosal cell on its way. It tasted of ash, of rotten blood, and the salty taste of tears from centuries of accumulated suffering. I gagged, eyes rolling back, but I kept swallowing. I swallowed hard. I swallowed his curse into my belly. A piercing scream rang out, shaking the very foundation of the house. Grah! Not me screaming. It was him. The giant black shadow convulsed violently. He recoiled, hitting the wall, clutching, his long neck as if he himself was being burned. The 5 other guests howled, their bodies starting to melt like candle wax meeting fire, leaking onto the floor into pools of foul black water. I felt my stomach cramp violently, as if something sharp had just formed inside. Everything went dark. The last image I saw was the teapot in my hand cracking in 2, and that black shadow dissolving into nothingness with a look of fear. I woke up at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle 3 days later. My throat felt like it was stuffed with hot coals, and I realized I couldn't speak. A feeding tube was inserted straight into my stomach. The police said a neighbor called 911 when seeing smoke rising from the house. Firefighters found me unconscious on the front lawn, hand skin scorched, mouth oozing black blood. The house, it burned down completely. They said it was due to an old gas leak. But I knew it wasn't normal fire. Normal fire doesn't reduce old oak to fine ash in just 1 hour. I stayed in the hospital for 6 weeks to treat 3rd-degree esophageal burns. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive, though my voice would probably forever sound like the hiss of a broken water pipe. When I asked about the items remaining in the fire, scribbling on a sticky note, the police officer shook his head. Nothing left, son. Everything turned to ash. Even the porcelain tea set in the dining room, I wrote, hand trembling. Porcelain? He frowned. Porcelain usually withstands heat well. There should have been shards left. But the forensics team didn't find any ceramic shards. Not a single small piece. I sighed in relief. It was gone. I won. I destroyed it. But that relief only lasted until this morning. The surgeon walked into my room with a serious face, clipping an X-ray film onto the light box. "Elias, we found the reason your stomach is still aching dully," he said, pointing to a bright white spot deep in my abdomen. "It seems you swallowed a foreign object during the fire. It is embedded in the stomach wall. Scar tissue has covered it, so we don't dare operate to remove it yet." I narrowed my eyes to examine that white spot. It wasn't metal. It was a sharp, triangular fragment. A shard of bone, china, and on the black and white shadow of the X-ray, I swore I saw a faint pattern, the shape of a rose petal. I went cold. I didn't destroy it. I absorbed it. Tonight, the hospital is quiet. As I lay alone in the dark, listening to my heartbeat, I noticed another sound. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from inside my chest. Bloop. Bloop. The sound of thick liquid being poured. And right after was the faint clinking of porcelain hitting together, echoing up from the stomach. I didn't escape. I have become the new teapot. And I feel hungry. I think I'm about to invite new guests over. If you see me somewhere, please don't start a conversation. And absolutely, never accept my invitation for tea.